Have you ever wondered who would truly stand by your side if you lost everything? If the comfortable life you built vanished overnight, leaving you with nothing but the clothes on your back and a desperate need for help, who would open their door? Who would offer a hand, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care? I used to believe I knew the answer. I was Michael Anderson, 34 years old, living in a modest two-story colonial house in the Chicago suburbs, complete with the white picket fence I meticulously maintained every Saturday. My neighborhood was the picture of American stability, tree-lined streets where kids rode bikes until dusk, neighbors who waved from their porches, and the comforting rhythm of predictable lives. Within those walls, I held a deep, unshakable faith in family. Blood, I'd been taught since childhood, runs thicker than water. My parents, Robert and Linda, drilled this into me, along with my older brother David, the golden child who could do no wrong, and my younger sister Sarah, whose every whim was indulged. Our family gatherings were legendary: Thanksgiving feasts where Mom's roast turkey was the centerpiece, Christmas mornings filled with expensive gifts and forced cheer, Easter brunches where we all pretended our relationships were as perfect as the matching outfits Mom insisted on. I worked hard as a senior software developer, earning enough to live comfortably but far from extravagantly. What no one knew, not even my family, was that beneath that unassuming exterior, I'd been quietly building something substantial, a nest egg born from years of discipline and a side project I poured my nights into. I believed in the facade of our perfect family unit, the shared history, the unspoken promise that we'd always be there for each other. But life, I was about to discover, has a cruel way of stripping away illusions. What you are about to witness is a story of profound betrayal and unexpected revelation. It's a journey that began not with a real tragedy, but with a carefully constructed lie. A lie I told to uncover a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Have you ever felt that gnawing doubt, that quiet suspicion that the people you trust most might not be who they appear? That the bonds you cherish might be conditional, fragile things that shatter under pressure? I needed to know. I needed to test the foundation of everything I believed about loyalty and love. So, on a crisp October morning, under a sky the color of wet concrete, I made a phone call that would change everything. I told my boss I'd lost it all in a devastating fire. I told my family the same story, watching their reactions through the phone, hearing the gasps and the promises. But those promises, like so much else in my life, were built on sand. As the Chicago wind grew colder, hinting at the harsh winter to come, I began reaching out, one by one, to the people who called themselves family. The rejections came swiftly, each one a small death, a chipping away at the foundation of my world. David's guest room was suddenly being renovated. Sarah's sleek downtown apartment had strict condo rules. Aunt Martha's bad hip made hosting impossible. Cousin Tom was mysteriously struggling too. The excuses piled up, flimsy and transparent, each one a deeper cut than the last. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next, the unexpected lifeline thrown from the most unlikely source, and the shocking climax that unfolded on a seemingly ordinary Thanksgiving, will reveal a truth so raw and transformative that it will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and the lengths people will go to protect their own comfortable lives. The discovery I made wasn't just about who turned me away. It was about the surprising soul who reached back, and the devastating, yet ultimately liberating realization that blood ties mean nothing without the courage to show up when it truly matters. The lie I told was meant to uncover a simple truth, but what it revealed was a complex tapestry of human nature, greed, and the quiet, steadfast power of genuine love. What you are about to discover may surprise you, challenge you, and perhaps even resonate with a truth you've felt in your own life. The story of how I pretended to be broke and discovered who my family really was is about to unfold, and it begins with a single, devastating phone call that set my carefully constructed world on a collision course with reality. The silence that followed my revelation was heavier than the Thanksgiving turkey that sat half-eaten on the dining room table. My mother's shattered wine glass lay in a glittering pool of red at her feet, a stark symbol of everything broken between us. David's face had flushed crimson, then drained to a sickly pale. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her designer bracelet catching the low light as she stared at the projected bank balance on the screen, $3.7 million staring back like an accusation. My father just kept blinking, his jaw working silently, as if trying to swallow a reality too large to comprehend. The air in my grandmother's cozy bungalow, usually filled with laughter and the clatter of dishes, was now thick with shock, shame, and the dawning, uncomfortable realization of their own choices. If this moment resonates with you, if you've ever felt that gut punch of discovering someone you trusted wasn't who they claimed to be, leave a comment below about what touched you the most. Was it the raw vulnerability of asking for help? The sting of rejection from those who should have offered shelter? Or the quiet, profound dignity of my grandmother's unwavering support? Your stories, your reflections on betrayal and loyalty, are what make this space more than just a channel. They make it a community. Seeing those numbers appear, watching the carefully constructed facades of family unity crumble in real time, wasn't just about my personal vindication. It was a stark mirror held up to the uncomfortable truths many of us carry, that blood ties don't guarantee compassion, that prosperity can breed indifference, and that sometimes, the people we expect to catch us when we fall are the ones stepping neatly out of the way. When you like this video, you're not just giving a thumbs up, you're telling the algorithm that stories like this, stories of emotional truth and hard-won clarity, matter. You're helping ensure that this message about the difference between obligation and genuine care reaches someone else who might be sitting in a cheap motel room right now, feeling just as alone as I pretended to be. And if you subscribe, you're joining a circle that values authenticity over appearance, that seeks out the raw, unvarnished experiences that connect us all. You're saying you want more journeys like this one, more explorations into the complex, often painful, but ultimately liberating landscape of human relationships. My grandmother, bless her steady heart, was the first to break the heavy silence. She didn't look at my shell-shocked parents or my sputtering siblings. She looked directly at me, a small, knowing smile touching her lips, and simply reached over to pat my hand resting on the table. Her touch was warm, solid, real, a stark contrast to the cold, hollow space that had opened up between me and the rest of the room. "Well," she said, her voice calm and clear as a bell cutting through the fog of disbelief, "I suppose that settles that, doesn't it?" The simple weight of her words, the quiet approval in her eyes, was more powerful than any angry outburst or tearful apology could ever be. It was the anchor in the storm I had unknowingly unleashed. The silence that followed my grandmother's words was deafening. My father finally found his voice, his usual commanding tone now reduced to a weak whisper. "Michael, you didn't know. If we had known you were just testing us." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. My mother was still staring at the broken glass at her feet, as if mesmerized by the red wine seeping into my grandmother's pristine white rug. David, ever the pragmatic one, was already calculating. "So, what does this mean? Are you going to share this with us? After all, we are family." His voice had shifted from anger to entitlement in a matter of seconds. Sarah simply sat there, tears now streaming down her perfectly made-up face, her designer dress suddenly feeling inappropriate for the occasion. "I think it's time for everyone to leave," my grandmother said, standing up with a grace that belied her 78 years. "Michael and I need to talk." The next few minutes were a blur of hurried goodbyes, awkward hugs, and mumbled apologies. No one looked me in the eye as they filed out of the small bungalow, their expensive coats and designer bags now seeming like costumes they couldn't wait to remove. When the last car pulled away from the curb, leaving only the scent of turkey and regret hanging in the air, my grandmother turned to me with a knowing smile. "Now, tell me everything," she said, pouring us both a cup of tea. "From the beginning." Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, taking you back to where it all began, the accident that set this incredible journey in motion. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in early October when I made the first call. The Chicago sky was that particular shade of gray that seems to absorb all light, a perfect match for the mood I needed to project. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the very technology that had built my fortune, and dialed my boss's number. "Mark," I said, letting my voice tremble slightly. "I won't be coming in today." There was a pause on the other end. Is everything all right, Michael? There's been a fire, I replied, injecting just the right amount of shock and devastation into my tone. At my house. Everything's gone, Mark. The computers, my backup drives, everything. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I pushed through. I could hear the concern in Mark's voice as he offered me time off, which I politely declined, saying I needed to figure things out first. Next, I called my parents, my voice cracking as I told them about the devastating fire that had destroyed all my assets. The insurance company is saying it might take months to sort out, I explained, listening to my mother's gasps and my father's promises to help. Little did they know that while I was spinning this tale of destruction, I was actually sitting in my perfectly intact home, having already moved all my important documents to a safety deposit box and transferred most of my savings to an account my family didn't know about. The mindset required for this deception was not something I adopted lightly. For weeks, I had been preparing, creating a narrative that was believable yet devastating enough to test the limits of my family's loyalty. I had carefully considered the impact this experiment would have, not just on them, but on my own understanding of the relationships I had cherished for so long. The first call for help came 3 days after my accident. I sat in a small coffee shop near downtown Chicago, the smell of roasted beans filling the air as rain streaked down the large plate glass windows. I chose this particular cafe because it was far enough from my usual haunts that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew, yet close enough to the city center that my story of being temporarily homeless would make sense. I ordered a black coffee and waited, my heart pounding in my chest as I rehearsed what I would say. When I finally dialed my brother David's number, my hand was shaking slightly. "David, it's Michael," I began, my voice deliberately unsteady. "I'm in a real bind here. I need a place to stay for a few weeks, just until I can get back on my feet." There was a pause on the other end of the line, longer than I expected. "You know, Michael, the guest room is being renovated," David finally said, his voice tight. "And with the kids' activities, it's just chaos here. Have you tried a shelter?" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain-slicked streets outside. "A shelter? David, I'm your brother." "I know, but it's just not a good time," he replied, his tone already shifting to one of dismissal. "Maybe call Mom and Dad? They have that big house." The call ended with a vague promise to see what he could do, which we both meant nothing. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, watching people come and go with their lives, feeling like an actor in a play where everyone else had been given the script except me. The revelation that my own brother would suggest I go to a shelter rather than offer me his guest room was a punch to the gut, but it was only the beginning of the hidden truths I would uncover. What followed was a series of rejections that piled up like autumn leaves in a Chicago park. Each call, each conversation, revealed another layer of the facade my family had constructed. My sister Sarah, who lived in a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Lake Michigan, told me her building had strict guest policies. "It's not personal, Michael," she said over the phone, her voice echoing slightly in what I imagined was her marble-floored entryway. "The condo board is really strict about visitors staying more than a few days." This from the same sister who, just months ago, had asked me to co-sign a loan for her new luxury car, which I had done without hesitation. My Aunt Martha, who owned a large Victorian house in Oak Park with 3 spare bedrooms, claimed she had a bad hip and couldn't possibly take care of me. "You need someone who can really help you, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. This was the same aunt who had called me just last year to help her navigate a legal issue with her property, which had taken me countless hours to resolve. My cousin Tom, who I had loaned $10,000 to when he was starting his business, told me he was struggling too and couldn't possibly help. Each rejection was delivered with a different excuse, but they all carried the same message: I was alone. The Chicago winter was approaching, and I could feel its chill not just in the air but in my bones as I walked from one relative's door to another, only to be turned away. I spent nights in cheap motels, the kind where the carpets are stained and the air smells of bleach and desperation, watching the rain streak down the windows and wondering if this was how my life would always be. The journey through these rejections was transformative, each no stripping away another layer of illusion until only the raw truth remained. Just as I was beginning to lose all faith in family, A call came from an unexpected source. My grandmother, Eleanor, my father's mother, had never been particularly close to us. After my grandfather died, she had withdrawn into her own world, living in a small bungalow in a quiet suburb of Chicago. The house was modest, with a well-tended garden that she worked in every morning, rain or shine. At 78, she moved slowly but with purpose, her white hair always neatly pinned up, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. When my phone rang and I saw her name on the caller ID, I almost didn't answer, expecting another polite rejection. "Michael," she said when I finally picked up, her voice steady and clear. "I heard about your situation. My guest room has been empty since your grandfather passed. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." I was speechless. "Grandma, I don't know what to say." "Everyone else." "Let them be," she interrupted, her tone firm but kind. "People show their true colors when you need them most. Come tomorrow. I'll make your favorite casserole." The next day, I drove to her bungalow, the autumn leaves crunching under my tires. She greeted me at the door with a warm hug, the smell of baking bread and pot roast filling the small house. "We'll get you sorted out," she said, leading me to a comfortable room with a quilt-covered bed and a view of her garden. For the first time since starting this experiment, I felt a genuine connection, and the guilt of my deception washed over me anew. The contrast between her unconditional acceptance and the calculated rejections of my other family members was stark, illuminating the profound difference between obligation and genuine care. Living with my grandmother was nothing like I expected. Each morning, we would have breakfast in her sunny kitchen, sharing stories over coffee and homemade muffins. She never asked for details about my accident, never pried into my finances. She simply provided a safe space, a listening ear, and unwavering support. As Thanksgiving approached, she mentioned that the family would be gathering at her house, as they did every year. "They'll all be here," she said, kneading dough for her famous dinner rolls. "Your parents, David and Sarah, the aunts and uncles, cousins. Everyone." This was my moment. The perfect setting for the reveal. I spent the next week planning, my fingers flying across my laptop as I transferred funds back to my main accounts and set up the final act of my experiment. I rented a suit, bought a new car, and made arrangements that would soon change everything. On the eve of Thanksgiving, as my grandmother and I prepared the turkey and stuffing, I finally confessed everything. She listened quietly, her hands still busy with the cranberry sauce. When I finished, she smiled. "Sometimes, Michael, we need to lose everything to find out what we truly have," she said. "And sometimes, we need to test the waters to know who will swim with us and who will watch us drown." Together, we planned how the next day would unfold, a secret between us as the smell of roasting turkey filled her small bungalow. The behind-the-scenes preparation for this revelation was almost as impactful as the event itself. A quiet collaboration that strengthened the bond between us and set the stage for the transformation that was to come. Thanksgiving dawned bright and cold, a typical November day in Chicago with a crisp blue sky and the promise of winter in the air. My grandmother's bungalow was transformed, the small rooms filled with the aromas of roasting turkey, baking pies, and her famous herb stuffing. Relatives began arriving around noon, their expensive cars lining the quiet suburban street. My parents came first, my mother carrying a store-bought pie despite my grandmother's request not to bring anything. "We just wanted to help, Eleanor," she said, air-kissing my grandmother's cheek while her eyes scanned the modest house with poorly disguised judgment. David arrived next with his wife and 2 children, parking his luxury SUV diagonally across 2 spots. Sarah came alone, complaining about traffic and immediately asking for the Wi-Fi password. The aunts, uncles, and cousins followed, filling the small house with designer coats, expensive perfumes, and loud conversations about vacations, promotions, and new purchases. Throughout the day, they treated me with a mixture of pity and condescension. "It's such a shame about your fire, Michael," my aunt said, patting my hand. "But at least you have your health." "Have you considered going back to school?" my cousin asked. "Maybe a different field would be better for you." I nodded and smiled, playing the part of the down-on-his-luck relative they expected me to be, all while my grandmother watched with knowing eyes. The gathering was a perfect microcosm of the dynamics that had led me to this experiment: the performative concern, the subtle judgments, the underlying assumption that my worth was measured by my apparent success. After dinner, as everyone sat in the living room and dining room, too full to move, my grandmother stood up. "I have an announcement to make," she said, her voice clear and strong. "As you know, Michael has been staying with me since his unfortunate accident. What you don't know is that he came to me with a proposition." She looked at me, nodding for me to continue. I stood up, feeling all eyes on me. "I didn't have a fire," I said, my voice steady. "I lost nothing. I wanted to see who in this family would be there for me if I really needed help." A stunned silence fell over the room. "I called each of you," I continued, looking at my brother, then my sister, then my parents. "I asked for help, a place to stay, just until I could get back on my feet. Every single one of you turned me away." My father started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Except for Grandma," I said. "She welcomed me without hesitation, without judgment, without asking for anything in return." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "But there's something else you should know. While I was pretending to be broke, I was also finalizing a business deal I've been working on for years." I opened my banking app and projected it onto the TV screen. Gasps filled the room as they saw the balance: $3.7 million. "This is from the sale of my software company," I explained. "The company I built while working my day job, the one none of you took seriously when I mentioned it." I looked at my grandmother. "And this morning, I transferred the deed to my new house into both our names." I pulled out another document. "It's the house across the street from David, the one with the pool and 5 bedrooms that he's always bragging about wanting to buy." The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of my mother's wine glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the hardwood floor. The aftermath of my revelation was like watching a series of dominoes fall in slow motion. My brother was the first to speak, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You lied to us. To your own family," he shouted, pointing a finger at me. "No, David," I replied calmly. "I discovered the truth about our family. There's a difference." My sister tried a different approach, tears welling in her eyes. "Michael, we didn't know. If we had known, you were just testing us." "But that's exactly the point, Sarah," I interrupted. "You shouldn't need to know someone's net worth to help them when they're in need." My parents sat in stunned silence, my father staring at his hands, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. The rest of the family began to murmur amongst themselves, some defensive, some ashamed, some simply shocked. One by one, they began to leave, the atmosphere too uncomfortable to bear. My brother stopped at the door, turning back to me. "You've changed, Michael. I don't think I like who you've become." "I haven't changed, David," I said, standing beside my grandmother. "I've just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. And I've learned who my real family is." As the last car pulled away from the curb, my grandmother and I stood in her quiet bungalow, the remnants of Thanksgiving dinners still on the table. "Well," she said, patting my arm, "that was more eventful than most Thanksgivings." We laughed together, the sound filling the empty house, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Winter settled over Chicago, blanketing the city in snow and transforming the landscape into a quiet, white wonderland. My grandmother and I moved into the new house just before Christmas, the moving trucks arriving on a day when fat snowflakes fell steadily from the gray sky. The house was everything David had dreamed of: 5 bedrooms, a pool in the backyard, a chef's kitchen, and a view of the city skyline in the distance. We spent our first Christmas together in the formal dining room, surrounded by the smell of pine from the tree my grandmother insisted on decorating herself. "Family isn't about blood," she told me as we sat by the fireplace, mugs of hot chocolate warming our hands. "It's about who shows up, who cares, who loves without conditions." In the months that followed, life changed in ways I never expected. My brother called once, demanding to know if I would do the right thing and give our parents some of my money. I politely declined. My sister sent a long text message about how betrayed she felt, how I had ruined the family. I didn't respond. My parents, to my surprise, Came to visit one spring day, the Chicago air finally warming after a long winter. They sat awkwardly in my living room, admiring the view but not meeting my eyes. "We're sorry," my father finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "We didn't realize." "It's okay," I said, surprising myself. "People make mistakes. What matters is what they do next." That day began a slow, tentative healing process. Not everyone came back into my life, and that was fine. I had learned that family isn't about the number of people at your holiday table, but about the quality of their presence when it truly matters. As summer arrived, my grandmother and I sat by the pool, watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink. "You know," she said, sipping her lemonade, "sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters." I smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought me here, the deception, the heartbreak, the revelation, and ultimately, the peace. "You were right, Grandma," I said, watching as a firefly flickered in the gathering dusk. "Family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your heart." If you've ever had to discover who your real family is, comment here. I'm on this journey too. As the last light of day faded and the first stars appeared above the Chicago skyline, I found myself thinking about all of you who have walked similar paths. Stories like mine aren't just about revenge or revelation, they're about the quiet courage it takes to question the foundations we've built our lives upon. They're about finding the strength to stand alone when necessary, and the wisdom to recognize true connection when it appears. If this journey has resonated with you, if you've seen reflections of your own experiences in these words, consider subscribing to this channel. Here, we explore the raw, unvarnished truths of human relationships, the ones that hurt, the ones that heal, and the ones that ultimately define us. Your subscription isn't just a notification, it's an invitation to continue exploring these complex, emotional landscapes together. And if you've traveled with me to the end of this story, leave a comment with "I'm with you until the end" to let me know you're part of this community of truth seekers. A simple like on this video does more than just boost its visibility, it sends a message that these conversations matter, that we're all searching for authenticity in a world of carefully constructed facades. There's a video here on the side that complements this topic, another journey of discovery and transformation that I think you'll find meaningful. Click and continue with me there, because every ending is just a new beginning in disguise.